welcome to episode 26 of React Native Radio. I'm your host, Nader Dabbit. Today on our show, we have our panelist, Peter Pikarczyk.
Hey, everybody.
And our special guest today is Mikhail Novikov of Reindex.io. Mikhail, can you go ahead and introduce yourself and give us some background about how you got into programming?
Sure. Hi, I'm Mikhail, and I'm from Finland. I'm here talking to you from pretty cold Helsinki. And I'm a web developer or product developer, and I've been in industry for like 8 years, I guess. And for last 3 years, I've been really active in React ecosystem and working with React and doing web development, front-end development with it. And when it came out, it kind of changed the way you build apps, and I really liked it. So I almost immediately jumped on React bandwagon together with my co-founder Ville, and we've been doing some React consulting. And now that when Facebook last year announced GraphQL and Relay, we were really excited and thought it's going to be the best way to do APIs, the best way to handle state in the client. So we immediately tried to figure out what kind of startup we can make around it. So we stopped doing consulting and switched to doing Reindex, which is what we have been doing for last year.
So Reindex was founded by you and one of your co-founders?
Yeah, I'm the CTO and he's the CEO. And we're both React developers, and we've been doing consulting before, but decided that maybe we should do some product that will help us build the apps ourselves.
Yeah, so can you kind of go into exactly what Reindex offers?
Yeah, so the Reindex is like a backend as a service. You can also call it something like cloud database. Basically, it's a way to build your applications without working much on the backend. It provides you an API, and it provides you a way to customize the schema of your application, and then you can just write the front-end code. And we mostly focus on React and React Native. That's our main client platforms that we want to support the best.
So can you kind of go into, I guess, GraphQL and the difference between kind of manually setting up your environment versus going with a service like yours?
Yeah, sure. So the main sort of difference of Reindex versus other backends to service like Parse or Firebase is the API. And this API is GraphQL. And GraphQL is this technology that's used at Facebook, or a standard, you can call it a language. And at Facebook, they developed it to solve the very common problem they had when building the products. That it's really hard to build an API that will work well with for all the applications that you are building. And the API that will be flexible enough so that product developers can actually work with it without always requesting help from backend developers to change the API. So GraphQL basically lets you specify that those are the data you can get from the server. And this is how the data is connected. And they're structured typed language that lets you describe it. You can say, for example, you have a user type, and the user can post some tweets, and then people can favorite those tweets. And you basically describe the schema. There is the user, it has it has a list of tweets. And then after you describe the schema and basically got a server, you are able to query and traverse this data in one query. So you can say, for example, I want to have a user and I want to have 10 tweets. First 10 tweets, and then I want to have a content of all those tweets. And in normal REST, you would imagine that you'll have to either have a very, very big endpoint that allows you to get connected data, or you'd have to do multiple calls, which is not ideal, especially in mobile clients. And in GraphQL, you can just describe it in one query, and you can get all the data. And if you need to change something, if you need to get more data, if you need to get different data, you can just modify the query without modifying the backend. That's the selling point of GraphQL. And we thought that that's something that can help us differentiate from other backend services, because while they're great and we really enjoyed using, for example, Firebase in our consulting projects, the API isn't always ideal from the product developer point of view, because you might have to do too many calls to get the data, or the data might be unstructured. And GraphQL seems to solve the problems, because you can because you're get queries that get data, they're expressive, they're bigger, you can get more data, you can get all the data you need. So it kind of makes the APIs it makes it possible to build more generic APIs. And we thought it means that we can build a backend service, cloud API that already works with GraphQL, and it will be good enough to build any kind of applications with.
So if I wanted to create a new app and I wanted to use Reindex, how many different layers are there in between my React Native and my actual database? So I would have my front-end app, and then I would have Reindex. Is there any other layers there? Like, do I need to still have a separate database that Reindex kind of talks to, or is Reindex the actual database?
No, Reindex is actually the actual database at the current moment. We're thinking how we can expand so we can be in a universal layer that connects to any kind of different application. But currently, it actually serves as a database. So at the basic level, you don't need anything. You can just do a HTTP request to our API. You can get the data. You can use it. However, there are some client-side libraries that makes it much easier to use Reindex or to use GraphQL in general. For example, Relay, which is again Facebook's client-side library. And the cool part about it is because GraphQL is a typed language, because GraphQL has the schema, and the schema is introspectable, Relay can actually work smartly around the schema. And it makes it really easy when you're writing your applications, like React Native or React applications, to work with GraphQL, because you don't actually need to write this whole model layer or the layer that fetches data yourself. Instead, you just specify that your components require some particular set of data. For example, you can have a component like React Native component for a user, which will have, for example, a picture and a profile, and then you'll have a component inside that will have a list of each tweet. And then inside each of those components, you can specify this so-called fragment, a part of a GraphQL query, which describes what data needs. So for tweet, you can say content and author, and for the user, you want to get avatar and the name. And then Relay knows how to compose those queries together and automatically make the request and pass it to props to your components, which is very handy. And to make it even better, because it knows how this language, the GraphQL, is structured, if you later need some other data, but you already have fetched some of the data with Relay, it knows how to not overfetch. It knows how to reuse the data. So it acts like a caching layer inside your application, like an automatic caching layer inside your application.
So that seems pretty interesting, because I know we've looked into GraphQL at our company and we've played around with it, and we've actually built something similar. But I think one of the reasons we haven't gotten into it as far as using it in production is there's a lot of setup and things like that. And I feel like something like this might make that a little easier for someone to get their program going using GraphQL. Can you kind of give us an idea of what kind of use cases some of your customers have seen, and kind of where you see this fitting into people's apps?
Well, as I said, it's because it's a generic API, you can build all kinds of apps. I can tell you some use cases where we might not be the best use case, the best solution, because for example, it's not real time. So if you want a real time database, maybe some other database is better. But in general, you can build any kind of apps. But I think where it shines is exactly as you said. When you want to experiment with GraphQL, when you want to build an application with Relay, the amount of work you need to do currently is quite big, even versus standard REST applications. Because there are lots of ways to generate REST APIs from MongoDB nowadays, or from relational database. And they're ready-made solutions. And for GraphQL, at first you have to do it yourself. So with Reindex, it's really easy to prototype or start something or check out how to something with Relay and GraphQL, because all you actually need to do in order to start with Reindex, you basically need to define your application schema, and basically need to describe your types, what kind of types or tables you have in your data. And then you push it to Reindex and you get a working GraphQL API with that schema.
So is Reindex more or less Firebase with a GraphQL API for front-end development?
Exactly.
Cool. Awesome. And can you talk about any of the additional helper methods or, roles that you play to make a developer's life easier when it comes to using Reindex and GraphQL?
Well, look, GraphQL is basically just pretty low-level language. But then, the client libraries, for example, Relay, they have their own requirements, their own APIs that you need to satisfy in order to use them. And they're not particularly complex, but there are some intricacies. And we have solve this. Like you can use Relay out of the box without API, without any effort. As soon as you're push your schema, you have a Relay compatible API, and I think that makes it really easy to get started with Relay. Otherwise, other helpful stuff we provide is, for example, authentication system. So you don't need to set up your own password-based authentication. You can connect some social provider like Google or some authentication provider like Auth0, and immediately you'll have authentication in your app. And together with that, we have permission system, which lets you specify user rights and which users can run which queries, which users can access which data, which users can update the data.
Nice, that's really cool.
Yeah, and last thing is, if you obviously at some point you'll understand that this kind of generic system is not enough, and you want to extend it. And we have a system of webhooks where you can plug in any other service to react to any changes in the database. So, for example, you can send an email after some change has happened to the database. So this makes it extensible and reusable. We don't try to lock you in our system. We want people to extend it and to try more stuff.
So if I had my data and my all of my application running with GraphQL, and I wanted to move my application to another provider, or I wanted to just extract the data, is there a way to do that?
Well, to be honest, currently there's no automatic way to extract the data from Reindex, but we'll obviously provide you a data dump as soon as you ask, just write to our support. But yeah, we plan to have this way. There's no 100% automatic way to move the data from Reindex and to get the GraphQL application running on your own server, but it is made using GraphQL, so it is an open standard. So you can re-implement and have a system similar to Reindex yourself. I think with less effort than with other backend as a service which have custom REST APIs.
Yeah, I feel like the whole authentication and authorization, all of that stuff that you guys have built into that seems like it would be a really good draw, I guess, for people that are kind of looking into building a full-fledged application and don't want to do a lot of setup on the back end. All that stuff is usually extremely complicated, and it seems to be a lot of work. But can you kind of go into how that process would go as far as interacting with the authentication part of your platform?
Oh, it's actually pretty simple. Basically, we have a GraphQL type that is built in our system, and there's GraphQL mutations, and you can just insert the information about your social provider into it, and then the login sort of gets enabled in Reindex. And this provider can be something like Google or Twitter or GitHub, or it can be Auth0, which is a generic provider for all the kind of for different different authentications, including for example username password authentication or passwordless authentication. Then, for example, we have a help library called Reindex-JS, and you can just do Reindex.js login and name of provider. And for social providers, it will open the pop-up with OAuth dialog, the one where you can authorize the application to use the data. And as soon as the user authorizes, a user is created for this, a Reindex user is created for this user, and he's logged in the application. And we use JSON web tokens, and the user information basically encoded in them. And Reindex understands those web tokens naturally.
It's awesome that you support authentication and stuff like permissions out of the box. I know that it's always kind of tedious to get up and running, and every app needs, or there's a good chance that it needs authentication or permissions or whatever. And I feel like I'm always starting from scratch when doing that stuff.
Yeah, I perfectly know what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah. Do you want to expand Reindex.js and add any more features or helper methods to improve, other tasks that we find ourselves doing every time?
Yeah, of course. Yeah, our goal is to build the most, the best developer experience we can have for backend as a service. That's our goal, because why I love React is because the developer experience is so great. There is code reloading. You can set up your app pretty fast. Everything works fine, and it's flawless. You don't have to you don't have any any stones. There are no like inconvenient stuff that you have to do. Unlike, for example, when you're building backend, where you have to like building REST API is not the best part, the best part of the developer's job, and it's definitely not the most innovative. It's not where your value as a product is, because people see the front end, not your backend API. So we want to take this unfun part out of product development, and we want to make it as smooth as possible to use Reindex. I guess we're not there yet, but that's our ultimate goal.
Do you happen to have any like example projects or something that a user might look at just to get started easily?
Definitely. We have starter kits, which are like a seed project, so with basic stuff set up. Like there's one for React. I'm currently building one for React Native. And we also have example projects. For example, we have a gallery app, like an Instagram-like app built with React Native that use Reindex. And we also have to do MVC.
So can you kind of go into the difference between the APIs for React Native and React, and like what you have for both platforms and what you only have for each, and kind of the future plans for the two platforms, or if they're even that much separated?
Practically, there is no difference. Now that React Native works with the Relay out of the box, it's like I've been porting one React app to React Native, and I could reuse the Relay part almost literally. So I could take the queries and just copy them to the new project, then it just worked. Of course, I had to redo the components, but otherwise it was really close. And from point of view of Reindex, it's just like HTTP API, so it doesn't. It can work in React and React Native with no difference. The only limitation currently is that the social login that's built in Reindex, like with Facebook and Google, it currently requires the browser because it needs to open this OAuth confirmation box. So this part you can't use in React Native. But then you can use OAuth 0, and it provides the same social providers. And it has a native log component, like a login component for React Native, both Android and iOS.
So OAuth 0 actually has like a native React Native, or I guess a specific React Native provider thing?
Well, it's basically just their native component that's wrapped into React Native.
Okay, yeah, that's awesome. I love OAuth 0. I've used OAuth 0 quite a bit, and it's been a really good experience. I've seen them a lot everywhere. Did you guys go with them because a lot of people are using it, or was it just easy to integrate?
We actually had to implement our own checkout, like automated checkout and automated sign up flow. And we found that OAuth 0 is just the best experience there is. So we decided that of course we want to support it because it's such a great experience. You don't need to. It's so easy to set up login. It's so easy to set up hard stuff like passwordless login or login with the SMS code. So we just want to support the best providers there are, and OAuth 0 is definitely one of the best currently.
So right now, what is the pricing and how does that all work with Reindex?
Yeah, so we have a free development plan, which has some limitations, but it's perfectly fine for developing the application. And then our production plan starts from $49 per month. Then they just linearly scale based on basic number of API calls you can make. So the more your app is used, the more you have to pay for Reindex, but otherwise it's pretty simple.
Okay, yeah, that sounds pretty good. What are your future plans as far as anything we haven't kind of gone into? Is one question, and I guess another part of this is I'm kind of curious your take on the whole parse situation that happened a few months ago, and kind of if that's affected people's interest in your product at all, and kind of your entire take on that whole situation.
Yeah, so our first reaction to the parse being closed down was we should make a parse compatible server just tomorrow. But then we've noticed that a day after parse was shut down, there have been 50 different services declaring how they will support parse. So we thought that that's not the kind of market we want to compete in, because we're not selling the same product as parse. We have different backend service, and we want to focus on making this part the best. So we want to provide the best GraphQL API, and we want to be the best tool to build React and React Native apps. And there have been quite a backlash about parse that they're closing down and now no one should trust backend as a service. But I don't think it's a correct assessment of the situation. I mean, they closed down, but they closed down in a really nice way. They've provided their server, they built a separate server for people, an open source server they can use. So I think if other services want to learn how to close, they should learn from parse because they've been really nice about it. And as for Reindex future plans, well, one thing we want to explore is how to be like a kind of a service that lets you unite your different API providers. That we want to not just be a database you can use, but also something you can plug other services in. So you could have Reindex as one API, and then all your other services, including your own RESTful services or some third-party services, can just be plugged inside Reindex into one GraphQL API, and you connect the types from different services together. I think this way you can. This would be like an API gateway, but a better API gateway than usual because GraphQL lets you actually connect them together. It won't just be multiple services on the same server, but more like one unified API that you can use for your app.
So that sounds really cool. How would that all work? Can you give an example of how someone like myself could interact with a separate API through Reindex?
Yeah, let's have some very simple example. Already when you're logged in to Reindex, for example, with Twitter, you will get this token with which you can do calls to Twitter API. And currently you have to do it manually, so you can just automatically use GraphQL to query Twitter API. But what if you, when you had Twitter API connected, what if you could get the types from Twitter APIs, for example, tweets of the user, and then you can connect them to the user inside Reindex. So when you're querying for user, you can also get his tweets from Twitter. And it will be opaque for you. You don't need to know that these tweets come from Twitter because you still query Reindex, but then we, behind the scenes, query for user tweets and return it to you from your GraphQL query, together with the data from your actual application, Reindex application. That's a very simple example. And then a more involved example is imagine you have some sort of legacy API. And you want to use this legacy API with some modern service, or you want to extend it, but then you don't really have manpower or you don't want to actually modify this API. I've seen it many times. People, for example, have Drupal webshop API or WordPress API, and they don't really want to mess with WordPress and Drupal. It's been there for years. But they just want to, build a modern application, a React Native application to it. Then you just can take Reindex and what we want people to be able to is take Reindex and add their legacy API inside Reindex as Reindex types. And then, for example, they can extend it. They can add to existing third-party legacy API types their own fields. For example, they had some old user type and they want to add some metadata to it. And we want people to be able to do it in Reindex, inside Reindex schema. And then those types will be stored in Reindex. And then all the rest of the data will be taken from third-party API. But from the product developer point of view, you would just make one GraphQL query and get all the data together, and it will be totally transparent. You don't have to worry about data that's in the legacy API and which data is in your new data API. That's the dream, the long-term vision.
Oh, nice. So speaking of legacy, say I have a parse app that I want to bring over to Reindex. Do you support that right now? Is there any way I can migrate that data over?
Not in a very automatic way. You probably will have to rewrite your front end because you would need to use GraphQL to query for the front end. But yeah, you can probably get the data from parse as JSON and then import it, but there's no automatic way currently, unfortunately. You have to do it manually. But we can help. If you actually have data in parse, you can just, contact us and we're very willing to help and, help you write the script or help you get the data in. We want to make the experience as smooth as possible.
Cool. That's good to know.
What kind of reaction and adoption have you seen so far of Reindex, and how has that growth been since you guys launched up until now?
We have one customer who launched a production application with Reindex just on Sunday, or on Saturday actually. Yeah, on React Amsterdam. And to be honest, the adoption hasn't been that great. And I think the biggest problem is that people are still kind of trying to learn the whole GraphQL and Relay ecosystem. And we kind of wrongly assumed that people would need help with that. They would need help starting with Reindex, or with GraphQL and Relay, but they will only need help starting with Reindex. So our documentation focused on that, like, how to work with Reindex, not how to work with Relay and GraphQL. And I think that was a mistake of ours. And Relay adoption has been good, but not great yet. And people are still kind of trying to figure out why they should use Relay. So we are working now on kind of trying to promote Relay as a platform more. And then if we promote it, if we make it better and easier to use, if we make it more understandable to people, we think Reindex adoption will be affected by that too in a positive way.
Yeah, I agree. I think you guys were so cutting edge when you guys came out that it's going to be something that's going to for sure be a thing, and there's going to be a lot of adoption. It's just, building up that momentum and being there when that wave comes. I think you guys have, since you guys have already established yourself, you'll be, the guys that people go to. And as this ecosystem grows and more people start to adopt it, a lot of people I think will be using stuff like this. You can look at Firebase and see, the growth that they've had. And if people start adopting this way of building their APIs, you guys are already there and seem to be doing a pretty good job as far as I can tell. I've already played around with Reindex a little bit, and I've been pretty impressed. So.
Cool. Yeah, we certainly have the same hopes. I agree that we've been a bit too early with it. We started working on GraphQL and on Relay before they actually released it. We were working on based on the presentations they had and based on the app they said we're using GraphQL, and we reverse engineer the queries that Facebook's making to their GraphQL servers to see how the GraphQL queries look like. So
wow.
I guess we have been too early.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Do you guys communicate with the team a lot, or do you guys have any communication, I guess, that goes on regularly with the Facebook team?
Yeah, we have been talking to them, especially when they just started, when just released GraphQL JS and GraphQL the standard. We have been trying to be active there, and we contributed a couple of fixes, and we've been talking about how to do different things there and how GraphQL should proceed. We're trying to be active there. We haven't been as active as we would have had because we have to work on Reindex, but yeah, we definitely communicate with them. I think the author of GraphQL even mentioned us in one of his presentations. Said we were really brave to jump onto GraphQL bandwagon so early. So
did you go to React Amsterdam?
No, unfortunately no. But one of our clients who just launched the app, he was there. But we're going to React Europe, and let's see if we get to talk there or just visit. But again, we are trying to be more on conference space too.
You're going to be at React Europe. I'll be there, so maybe we should get together and get lunch or coffee or something.
Everyone's going to React Europe except for me.
It's still not too late, is it? Or is it?
I think they have late tickets. I think they still have some.
I wouldn't be able to check. But so
it's a shame.
Yeah, next year. So if there's any feature that you wish you had, or you're really excited about in the future, is there anything like that you're kind of excited about, or wish your own product had that you're working on?
Yeah, so there is no current official way to do subscriptions or real-time queries or live queries in Relay and GraphQL. And the community is working on this, and I'm pretty excited to see where it goes. And I wish we had it already because people keep asking us how do you do this, subscriptions, how do you do live updates, and we can only, offer solutions using other services. I'm really excited to see how GraphQL evolves and how the subscriptions will be there, and really excited to implement them.
Cool, that'll be exciting then. Just because I've had issues with that in the past too, and GraphQL has been my weekend project. Whenever I get to something like that, I just say, well, the weekend's over. I'll see if I can figure it out next weekend.
And if you think about it, GraphQL is like an ideal language for subscriptions because you basically specify what kind of data you want updates on, what kind of data you want regular updates on, and then you just get the updates with this data. Usually you subscribe to some, channels and they're kind of fixed. But if the implementation in GraphQL would be such that you can just, take arbitrary query and then subscribe to it, I think that would be amazing.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I can't wait for that to come out.
So if someone wanted to go ahead and get started with Reindex, what would be the best way for them to go about doing that?
With React or React Native?
I guess
because with
React Native, maybe.
Yeah, well, we don't have a tutorial for React Native yet, but we have an example project for React Native, which has like a full-fledged application. So you basically can it's in Reindex-examples repository in our GitHub organization. So you should just clone this repository and take a look at the application and go from there. I think it's pretty comprehensive and it uses some external services like Auth0 and upload care for uploading files. So it's lots of there to see. And then you can just, continue from there.
So I know we kind of went over this a little bit, but like for a beginner, is Relay something that should be part of the initial process, or is Relay something that you would? Okay, so you probably should go ahead and implement Relay as part of the initial kind of getting set up.
Yeah, that's one problem, that you have to learn so many things when you do it, because you need to learn GraphQL, you need to figure out what Relay is. But I think the huge amount of value comes from Relay. I think we're not promoting it enough ourselves because it's pretty amazing. Because it's just magical how you have your composable components and you just add this, data definition to each component, and then you have composable components that also know how to fetch data for themselves. And it's like, it just happens. It just works. And they have your pagination, they have optimistic updates with mutations, you have like client-side cache. It's magical. I just can't describe how great of experience it is to use Relay. And I guess I need to tell this more to people, because people don't yet seem to be that excited about Relay as we are.
I think the reason that it is the case because setup could be a little more tedious, than people have been used to with, everything else that's been coming out that's been super easy. So until that gets a little easier, getting people on board with Relay is going to be harder.
I think GraphQL, I think Reindex is definitely the easiest way to get started with Relay. You don't need to set up any servers, you just have Relay and you can start using it because you have GraphQL API ready for you.
Oh, yeah, exactly. That's why I'm going to start using Reindex, because for me, I have currently a Keystone project that I'd like to convert to use GraphQL and Relay, but it's just been taking so much additional time than what I thought it would take, just because of all the extra things that I have to throw in there on both the client and the server. And I've been kind of looking into a different way I can handle that, and Reindex solves that for me, so I can go back to doing what I was planning on doing instead of wasting time setting up GraphQL.
Yeah, I agree. That it's a new platform, so there are no libraries to generate the GraphQL API for automatically, or at least not enough libraries to do that. There are some, but you still need to do lots of work and you need to understand all the concepts. And it's quite heavy on different concepts that you have to, figure out, like what Relay is, what Relay isn't. And there have been lots of questions like Stack Overflow. I've been trying to monitor Relay and GraphQL questions there to help people. And lots of people don't get it at first. I guess, as I said, we're not doing a great job explaining it ourselves. We need to do a better job and explain why Relay is so awesome.
Well, that's great. I think that's just a lot of work. If you guys are building this company and you're handling documentation and you're implementing features, and on top of that, you're trying to educate the community. Hopefully, there'll be more resources out there for people to get this type of information. There'll just be a bigger, community around it. And I know a lot of people are already doing this type of stuff, and they're doing a great job. But I just think it's so new that there just isn't as much out there as there is for some other stuff, and that'll change.
Yeah, I'm sure it will change. especially now that Relay can be used with React Native, for example, out of the box. That was it was so weird that it took almost 1 year for it to actually support it out of the box because of some pretty weird library problems, internal library incompatibility. So I think people who do mobile applications, they're more open to using backend as a service. So as React Native supports Relay natively now, I think it will drive our adoption because somehow people in mobile space have adopted this backend as a service philosophy or mentality earlier than web developers. Firebase and Parse, they're not that old, but they're still quite new and quite new idea. And mobile backend as a service is it's a huge industry.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that I'm going to try to work on the next couple of weeks is putting together a tutorial for this whole React Native with Relay and Reindex. And if I get that put together, I'll definitely let you know about it.
Sure. If you have any questions, just go ahead and ask, because I actually wanted to do that too. To have some blog post explaining some hard parts of Relay.
Okay, great. Well, I think we'll go ahead now and get to our picks. Peter, do you have any picks today?
Yeah, so my pick, and I hope I didn't take it from anyone else, the source code for the official F8 app from the Facebook conference, they released a site called makeitopen.com, and it's literally the whole process of how they built the app, the technologies they used, as well as the code and everything else that comes with it to build the F8 app. It's really cool. It's a great way to get started with React Native and all the other fun things that Facebook has been working on.
Okay. Mikhail, do you have any picks?
Yeah, sure. So my pick is from the authors of React Native Playground. Everyone probably knows React Native Playground. It's the website where you can test and run your React Native apps in the web. And they've released a new product called Reploy, which is available at reploy.io. And it's again application where you can a web application where you can run your React Native apps in browser, and other users or your testers can run it in the browser too, can comment it, make annotations. It's basically like a testing and app to run your React Native apps in browser and test them. And one of the reasons why I picked it, because it's built with Reindex. The backend for it is built with Reindex, so we're really happy to have our first actual product built with Reindex released.
That's really cool. That's awesome. I'm definitely going to check it out.
Yeah, this is my first time hearing about it. I'm looking at it now. It looks pretty cool. Okay, well, my picks for today are going to be, the first one is going to be a site on Pluralsight, a course on Pluralsight actually, called Building Data-Driven React Applications with Relay, GraphQL, and Flux. And it's very, meaningful compared to what we've been talking about today. If you're trying to dip your toes into Relay and GraphQL, this will give you about a 3-hour introduction, to how all this stuff works, and it's been pretty good for me. My second pick is RxJS in Action, and it's basically a Manning Early Access publication book, so it's about halfway done, I think, or maybe even less. But it's a really good introduction into RxJS if you're trying to kind of learn about that stuff. So I highly recommend it. I've read a lot of blog posts, documentation, and tutorials about RxJS, and this has kind of been the best, in my opinion, resource for learning RxJS. So it's RxJS in Action by Manning Publications, and its authors are Paul Daniels and Louis Atencio.
I was just going to say, you should, for everyone listening, check out the Egghead RxJS videos too, because they're really awesome. And Jafar Hussein does a really good job of explaining observables.
Yeah, absolutely. Egghead has a ton of RxJS stuff, and all of it's been good. That I haven't seen all of it so far, but all of the stuff I have seen on Egghead's been great. Okay, well, that wraps up episode 26 of React Native Radio. Thank you for listening. We'll see you next week.